Thank you everyone for coming. We have a nice little small group, but that's to be expected. It is June. It's towards the end of June. And again, some people have gone back to work, others have not. And the most important people are here right now. So thank you for being here today. As most of you all know, I'm Jessica, and I am your Wellness and Lifestyle Director. But to give you a little bit, and I know someone just joined us, so welcome. To give you a little bit of a lowdown on me and where my area of specialty, why I'm your wellness director, is wellness is kind of an area that I specialize in. I did a Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology at the University of New Brunswick. So I am a newbie, not a newfie. And after that, I actually wasn't sure what I was going to do with my career after being a kinesiologist. And I actually went on to do my master's specializing in exercise physiology, but specifically cardiac and pulmonary rehab. So I did that in Pennsylvania. And then when I was done, I came back to Canada. And at the time, nurses were still doing primarily the work in cardiac rehab. So I actually couldn't get into my field. And then that's when I started actually managing clubs. So I started managing group exercise, personal trainers, and overseeing clubs. And that's how I made my way to you guys. And one of my career paths right before I joined the Glencos, I'm also a university instructor. So I teach with Mount Royal University, and I'm a sessional instructor. So when my colleagues take their sabbaticals, they come to me and say, Jessica, can you teach my university course at the U of C? So I'm a university instructor, and I teach these specific topics. So one of the topics I teach at the U of C is actually public health. And my courses that I teach at Mount Royal are exercise physiology, biomechanics, movement mechanics, mental health, program design for personal trainers, and then fitness appraisal and lifestyle counseling. So it's an area, everything we're talking about today is what I talk about to people all the time. But sometimes as your wellness director, you don't know that I do all these other fun things on the side too. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is how do we continue to live well, live the lives that we're living now, but also be able to live that later on in life also. So I'm going to share my screen and my slides with you. Hopefully you all got the email today that I sent you my slides, because I'm one of those people. I like to give you my slides in advance. And now, can you guys see this okay? You can see my slides. Did they come up on the screen? Yes? Okay. So basically, it's about living well through what we're living through right now, COVID-19. So to make sure that we're not getting sick and beyond. And this could easily be a 3-hour talk. And I know most of our speakers have done anywhere from 30 minutes to 45 minutes up to an hour. So what I've done is I've set my timer for 45 minutes because if anyone's done anything with me in the past, I'm really good at talking and I will go over my time. I literally did a presentation with Helen Vanderberg on Friday. The two of us went over, and we went over by a lot, but it was a really important topic because we were guiding personal trainers and fitness instructors of where is our industry going after this, and how do you become a virtual instructor, and how do you do pre-recording, and what are the liabilities associated with that. So it was important. All right. So if you do, you can ask me lots of questions. I've actually started pulling out some of my favorite books where I get a lot of my information. And I, again, as some of you also know this, I do research with the U of C on dementia. So we just finished one of our dementia studies. My intention, I didn't really know a lot about dementia, and I was actually forced, and not in a bad way, to learn more about dementia. And I do really have to tell you, it is an area that I find fascinating, and I can't get enough of it. So I do research with the U of C, and I really specialize in older adults. So one of my favorite books that I actually reference a lot, Let's Talk About Aging. Now that's not what our talk is about today, but I will address it based on what your needs are. So if you have questions specific, I will do that. I know Tudor and Lynn asked some questions about what should we be doing as older adults, or maturing adults, I should say. I really don't think you guys are old. What I would say, if you're like 90 years old, that's when you're old. When you're in your 60s, your 70s, and even your 80s, I don't know about that. I don't like that. You're in your youth still. So let's talk about this. So right now, I'm just going to talk about some of the research that is out there so that we know it's evidence-based, and talking about how can we continue to live a long, healthy life and a vibrant life. So right now with COVID-19, and I know I can tell you right now, I have drank too much. I have eaten too much. I haven't done as much physical activity as I should. And so if I'm the person who should be doing the walk and talking the talk, chances are a lot of people have noticed that in their lives, they've gotten a little slack. So how can we get back on track? So I'll talk a little bit about that. I am going to put a bit of extra focus on sleep. Because a lot of times most people, you guys, I'm preaching to the choir, right? I'm preaching to those who are converted, and you do seem to have a good understanding of physical activity, which I will still address. And I'm going to address nutrition. But I'm going to talk about sleep, because sleep is actually becoming more and more of a problem, and our society seems to value it less and less. And more and more evidence is coming up about the importance of proper sleep. So I will address that. And what I want to do is I want you to have a vibrant life now, but also as you age. I don't think anybody wants to be bedridden. I don't think any of you at this point in your lives want anyone have to care for you more than what's going on. So trying to lead that long, beautiful life. So let's talk about that. So I'm going to be addressing physical activity. There's a little hair flying around the room. I'm going to address physical activity and fitness. I'm going to talk about sedentary behavior and kind of how that goes with physical activity, because often we think physical activity and fitness are the same. And I'll talk about the importance of moving, pitter patter, as my mom always says. We're going to talk a little bit about eating to nourish the body. And again, I'm not a registered dietitian. I have done a nutrition diploma. So I did my diploma with the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, because I did a lot of dietetic courses in my undergrad. And I wanted to go a little bit more Eastern medicine and get a bit of an understanding of that. So that's why I did a diploma in that. So I'll talk a little bit about nutrition. I'm going to talk about healthy sleep, and then just that reminder about mental health and self-care. So I think as a society, we are getting much better at talking about mental health, and people are getting better at seeking help and saying, I need help, and that's okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So number one, of course, here are the physical activity guidelines. Now, even though it says right here, 18 to 64, this is what the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology says, and they are the governing body for all of Canada. They are the gold standard in Canada. In the States, I'm also certified in the States as a clinical exercise physiologist, because I used to go to school there and work there. Okay, I see a puppy. What kind of puppy? Is that, oh my gosh, is that a schnauzer? It's a schnauzer. I have a schnauzer. Denise is like, I need to see this dog. Where is my schnauzer? I don't know where he is right now. His name is Gussie Wussy. I'm such a child, eh? It's like squirrel. Okay, so in Canada and in the States, we've gotten together and we have come up with what we recommend and what the research has showed us. So even though it says 64 years, the older adult, and when I say older adult, I actually don't feel that way. Our maturing adults, so individuals over the age of 65, our guidelines are exactly the same. The only thing that they've added to this is balance, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. So to achieve health benefits, adults aged between 18 to 64, but that's say, let's go right to 100, should accumulate at least 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity. And we prefer aerobic physical activity a week in at least 10-minute bouts. And the reason we say aerobic in nature, that's large rhythmical patterns. So something like working on the treadmill, going for a walk. I cannot stress, our society doesn't appreciate the importance of just going for a walk. And walks are so important, especially for you and your partner, if you're fortunate enough that you have a partner around, especially for the ladies in the house too, Dora. I don't know how you feel about that when Lynn looks deep into your eyes. But you can get your partner talking really well if you're going for a walk and you're not making eye contact. So that's a wonderful way. So what we want to try to accumulate 150 minutes. So that could be 30 minutes a day over 5 days. That could be 50 minutes over 3 days. But what we're trying to do is make it more aerobic in nature, because aerobics is the foundation. So if we could build everything in a pyramid, cardiovascular endurance is the foundation of all physical activity. Then we should move into muscular endurance. Then we move to muscular strength. and then we go into power and performance, so the pyramid. So we really want to build up that cardiovascular system because that's what strengthens our heart. So when we exercise, our heart is a muscle. So that heart is going to get stronger. It's going to be more efficient. And it doesn't matter how old you are. So when people say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, that's a lie. As an individual who's worked with older individuals my whole career, I have seen people come in heart failure, with multiple bypass surgeries, diabetes, and like really ill with 20 different types of medications, and worked with them for months at a time and got them to a point where they're at a functional capacity. They've been able to cut back their medications. In their diabetic state, they've had to cut down their insulin intake. It's just absolutely wonderful. So the heart is a muscle. And I'm going to tell you, a gentleman, it was Dr. Starling, and his name is Frank Starling, and it's called the Frank Starling effect. So when we exercise, and we exercise to the point where we get winded and it's challenging and slightly uncomfortable, that actually creates this Frank Starling effect. And that's going to increase the strength of the muscle. But what it's also going to do is increase the size of the chamber, specifically the left ventricle. So the left ventricle will increase in size. If it increases in size, that means more blood can enter the heart. And if more blood, because now the muscle is more efficient, and specifically the left ventricle, the wall thickness will increase in size. So if the increase, more blood comes in and we can get more blood out, that means our cardiac output, and cardiac output is the amount of blood that your body can push around your body in 1 minute. So if we can increase your cardiac output without having to increase your heart rate, that's a sign that your heart is getting strong and it's efficient. So yes, yay, heart gets stronger. But as the heart also gets stronger, we can get more blood up to our brain, to the tips of our fingers and the tips of our toes. And so one of the things, if you've seen me work with our clients who are living with dementia, I have a number of our clients at the Glencoe who are living with dementia who have very poor cerebral perfusion. So their blood pressure, because of their medication, is really low, or they've got cardiovascular disease in the carotid arteries, or they've had strokes. And so then they start to show signs of vascular dementia. So if we can keep that blood pumping, and especially getting blood up to the brain, that's going to keep feeding the brain, and that's going to keep feeding the cells, and that's going to keep those neurons happy. Another thing, and I'm slightly tangenting because I know the population that I'm talking to right now, one of the things when we exercise at a moderate and especially a vigorous intensity, we release a neurotrophic factor, and it's called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. And BDNF is actually a neuroprotector, and it's a neurogenerator. So that means you can recreate new neurons in your brain. There are no other opportunities in our body that we will produce new neurons. It has to come from exercise, and it has to come from a vigorous intensity. That's where it gets you winded and of course, a little bit uncomfortable. No pain in the chest, of course, no lightheadedness, so no physiological distress. And it doesn't mean you have to jump into that today, right? Or tomorrow. Is slowly start to do little intervals, maybe 15 seconds to get the heart rate up and then come back down. Maybe it's 30 seconds and you come back down, but that releases BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So we really want to focus on our cardiovascular training. So I would recommend, if you're not doing a lot of cardiovascular training, try to see if you can sneak in at least 10 minutes a day, or try to sneak it into your workout. So when you have an opportunity, if you're at the gym or wherever you are, try to get a little bit more cardiovascular training in. We also recommend to keep the strength of our bones, and of course, and our muscles, is to do strength training. And we recommend that at least twice a week. And we want to hit 8 to 10 of our major muscle groups. So think your chest, your back, your shoulders, your biceps, your triceps, your core. So I'm saying core, not just crunches, but your whole core. Activities for the front of the thighs, so the quadricep activity for the back of the thighs, the hamstrings, the calves. And whenever you usually work the hamstrings or your quadriceps, you naturally work your glutes, but you could do a glute-specific exercise. So we want to do that. The other thing that we add on that you don't see here for our maturing adults, we want to do balance activities. So balance, of course, tells us a lot about how you're going to functionally maintain your independence. So if you're not doing balance exercises, one of the things, and I know one of you here does my gentle movement classes on Wednesdays at 11:30 a.m. And I always add an element of cardio. So we do cardio steady state. I have them do an element of a cardio interval series. So even though I may be gearing towards people who haven't exercised for a while and even our maturing adults, I still add intervals in there. We do an element of balance, and we also do stretching and functional activities of daily living. So that's one of the things you want to look at, is adding some balance activities. And it doesn't mean you have to have your hands going everywhere. It could just be hovering over your table. Now I saw, I think a question just popped in, so I'm just gonna take a peek at that, just in case. All right, let's just take a peek. Oh, that's a great question. Thank you, Denise. What about weight bearing versus not weight bearing exercise? Does it matter which you get more of for cardio? So we recommend, as you are maturing, that you do try to get more weight bearing activities, because that impact, so everything, your muscles and your ligaments and your tendons all respond when we have some impact. Now, I know that if you really enjoy working in the pool, is then try to go out for a walk every once in a while, because then every time our muscle contracts and we connect with the ground, that feedback goes to the muscles, the bones, and the tendons and ligaments, and then they respond by getting stronger. So thank you, Denise, for bringing that up. So I would say, as we're maturing, start to add a little bit more weight-bearing activity, but that doesn't mean you can't be in the pool. It doesn't mean that you can't do the elliptical, because at the end of the day, if that's going to make you do your cardio, I would rather you do the activities that you enjoy, because then you're more likely to do them. But if you can get impact in there every once in a while, like going for a walk or walking on the treadmill or going up and down the stairs, whatever that may be. Okay, so thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for asking. So that's just a little touch on the physical activity. So we want to try to get at least what the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology recommends is 3 to 5 days per week of large rhythmical activities, and then trying to get 2 strength training activities in a week. The treadmill feels like it has less impact. Yes, you are correct. And so you would have more benefit being on the road than the treadmill. But again, it comes down to if you prefer working on the treadmill or you like being in a gym environment. I'm one of those people that I know it's so hard to believe, but I'm not very outdoorsy. My outdoorsy is me sitting on a patio having a cocktail. So I will choose, and that's been my life, I will choose to work in an indoor environment. I prefer being in a club setting. I prefer to be on cardiovascular equipment than being outside. So I would personally choose working indoor, but yes, that's a great question. I would suggest whatever your preference is, but you will get more impact walking outside. And then you're allowed to ask these questions as we go, because you guys may have those also. So of course, the more physical activity, the more health benefits, the more functional independence. So one of the things people sometimes ask me as we're aging, is this part of the aging process? Some of it is and some of it isn't. As we start to age, and I want you to think about back when you were a child, and if you have grandchildren around or young children around, you see how active a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old is versus a 7-year-old, versus a 13-year-old, versus your 20s, versus your 30s. So naturally we become less and less active, but it doesn't mean that it's supposed to be part of the norm. So a lot of the aging process that we go through is because we're not as physically active as we used to be. And I always like to use the example of, thinking about when people were first coming out west and in the 1800s and the 1900s, and you were physically active. Every day you had to get up at whatever time, and you had to go to the garden, and you had to go on the farm and feed the animals, and you were busy. People were physically active. Nobody really went to the gym. Nobody took an hour of their day to work out. So one of the big things that we're seeing right now is, yes, as a society, we're getting better at exercising, but we're becoming more sedentary. So on average, we are sedentary for 8.9 hours a day as adults, and that does not include sleep. Our forefathers and our foremothers They were active. They didn't exercise per se, but they were physically active, pitter-pattering and kind of moving around the house and staying active. And so our society, and because of technology, it has allowed us to do things like sit and have a Zoom meeting. So we want to get more active, and I'm going to move to the next slide so you can see that. So what are some of the benefits of becoming more physically active? And I'm going to come back to sedentary behavior in the next 2 slides. So why do we want to be more physically active? And physically active doesn't have to be that we're doing cardiovascular training or resistance training. It could be that we're outside and we're doing gardening, or we're going for a walk, or we're vacuuming, or we're washing the floors. Those are things that are physically active. So physical activity, of course, it's going to help strengthen our bones and our muscles, and we do want to have some sort of impact. Because when we exercise, it releases happy hormones. So it decreases our likelihood, and I'm not going to take away, there's lots of people who still do a great deal of exercise and they eat well and they do things and they're still depressed. So I'm not taking away from that, but as a society, we are seeing more anxiety and more depression, and it doesn't correlate with the lack of physical activity and sedentary behavior that our society is participating in. And we do have evidence to say that when we exercise, you are less likely to have anxiety and depression. It doesn't mean that you won't have it, you're just less likely. It also helps us maintain a healthy body weight. So when we exercise, of course, our muscles are going to respond. And so we're also going to use the storage of fat, so carbohydrates. If we eat too many carbs, you eat too much fat, you eat too much protein, it all eventually, if it doesn't get used, it will get transferred and converted over to fat. And our body, especially as we start to mature, our body likes to store that fat in the abdominal region because it's an easy, convenient place to be able to find that energy source. So fat has a high energy calorie yield. So that means there's a lot more calories for every gram of fat. So our body likes to store stuff as fat, and then we like to keep it in our tummy, close to our organs and close so that we can just get the energy when we need it. It also helps us to prevent or reduce high blood pressure. And I'm going to go to glucose in a moment. So what happens, and coming back to the heart and that whole Frank Starling effect, when we exercise, so over time as we start to mature, we start to develop arterial, so there's an I in there, arteriosclerosis. Now, back in the day, we used to call this the natural hardening and aging of the body, and we're starting to find that it's not necessarily that it's natural. Yes, it starts to happen, but if we stay active, it's less likely. So we have arteriosclerosis and we have atherosclerosis. And atherosclerosis is where that plaque starts to develop. Arterial is when the arteries are starting to harden. So they don't open and close as well as they used to. So when you exercise, I'm making this up. Your vena cava would be about that big. But when you exercise, let's just say, for example, your artery, so the artery, let's say the aorta. The aorta is the largest artery in the body and it's coming out of the heart. And then we go into the arteries. So after that, the arteries are here. They're going to expand in size to be able to get all that blood to the muscle where it needs to be. And so when we're exercising, it's going to increase in size. But if you have arteriosclerosis, it's not going to have that ability to open and close as well. So your body, just like if you would turn a hose on, if you just turn the hose on a little bit, the water is going to trickle out. But if you really want that water to come out, you got to turn it on full blast. Well, if we need to get that around, and the hose is not going to increase the diameter or decrease the diameter, the pressure is going to increase. So the same thing happens in our body with blood pressure, because it doesn't have the ability to increase and decrease in size as well. Then your body has to respond to be able to move blood around even at rest by increasing your blood pressure. Well, when we exercise on a regular basis, our heart increases in size, the chamber increases in size, and our body gets more efficient, and that decreases our blood pressure. We call blood pressure the silent killer. And the problem is when we get into the smaller arteries where they start branching off into other parts of the body, those branches, and thinking about a branch in a tree, right? The tree trunk is really thick and strong, but the branches, as the tree gets bigger and those branches spread out, those branches get weaker and they're easier to break off. Well, the same thing happens in the body when we start to develop cardiovascular disease. is the branches that feed into the littler parts of the body actually get weakened, and then we damage those endothelial cells. And the endothelial cells are single layer cells inside the artery. And so when they get damaged, then what happens is LDL, which we call the bad cholesterol, but it's not bad cholesterol. Our society has made us believe that it's bad cholesterol. We need a little bit of it in our body, but too much is a bad thing. The LDL gets underneath those endothelial cells, and our body goes into a state of going, whoa, you can't be here. And then it responds. And then there's a multiple stages that cardiovascular disease develops. There are a number of people who live with high cholesterol levels, specifically LDL, what we consider bad cholesterol, who showed zero signs of cardiovascular disease because they never had damage to the endothelial cells. The minute that we damage those endothelial cells, that's where the problem is. And that can come from high blood pressure. That can come from high blood sugar. So I want you to think, if you left a piece of metal outside, and over a few days, unexposed, untreated metal, what would happen to that metal? It would start to rust, wouldn't it? Well, I want you to think that sugar, it doesn't do the exact same effect. So don't go and quote it, but it's just to give you a visual. Sugar, blood sugar in the bloodstream will do somewhat of a similar effect and damage those endothelial cells where the LDL can get behind in the artery to start the cardiovascular disease process. So, and also what happens when we exercise, insulin, I just had a brain moment. The insulin has the ability to come and trap the glucose and pull it through the cell. And so sometimes as we get as we get a little lazier perhaps, and we're not moving as much, we become a bit sensitive or insensitive where we can't pull the glucose in. So the glucose doesn't go into the cell to be used for energy. It keeps floating around the bloodstream. And that's where it causes problems like diabetes, obviously. It can cause issues to the eyes. It can cause issues to the brain. It can cause issues to the heart, all over the body, kidneys, you name it. It can also help us maintain being overweight or obese. It helps us to improve our sleep. So if anyone had young children at any point in their lives, we knew we used to run the kids so that they would sleep at night. Well, the same thing with adults. We need to almost poop ourselves out with some physical activity so that we can get the most out of that. It's also beneficial to help us in helping with smoking cessation, even alcohol use or other bad habits. So chances are when you exercise more, you're less likely to want to eat junk food. It also helps us manage chronic health disease or chronic cardiovascular disease, for example, dementia. It makes a difference in people living with dementia. I've seen it personally firsthand with our research studies. Pulmonary disease, you've seen it with individuals living with MS, ALS, all of those chronic health conditions. Diabetes, you name it, it makes a difference. It also gives people a purpose and value in life, and it increases the quality of life. And it also, and you've probably noticed in our 90 days, right, we're not social like we used to be. Well, exercising, especially in a group environment, really helps us maintain that social connectedness. Any questions about the benefits? You're like, I'm sold. Again, I'm preaching to the choir, aren't I? So let's talk a little bit about that physical activity and sedentary behavior. And I talked about it 8.9 hours a day on average as adults that we are not moving. And so sedentary behavior, and I say not moving, sedentary behavior is actually not the lack of just movement. Right now, I'm sitting up and I'm moving. This is considered sedentary behavior. So anything that we consider that is less than 1.5 METs. And you're like, what is a MET? A MET is a metabolic equivalent. And so we measure that in the world of cardiovascular disease and when we're working with chronic health conditions, is that 8 METs is considered functional capacity, like what we want people to work at, which most of you are doing, because I know I've worked with all of you at some point and you have seen you exercising. You're working around 7 or 8 METs when you're exercising. 1.5 METs, that means that I'm sitting up, I could be typing, I could be on the phone. It doesn't mean I'm just laying back watching television or doing nothing. So just being mindful of that. So physical activity is recognized as one of 4 common risk factors for non-communicable diseases, which are a major cause of death and disability worldwide. And of course, I'll be talking about nutrition. I'm not addressing tobacco use or excessive alcohol consumption because, as I've noticed with our Glencoe membership, okay, alcohol might be a problem because you can afford it, but there are not as many members who are smokers as there is members of other clubs because of the socioeconomic status. And of course, inactivity ranks 4th among the 5 leading causes of global mortality. So, you know, and it's becoming, and with this is interesting because I am starting to talk to my colleagues around Canada, and we're going to really have to, you know, come up with mandates to get people moving again, because we've had 90+ days of getting a little bit comfortable at home. And so, it's going to become a socioeconomic thing. So I had a meeting with colleagues last week, is who's going to be able to afford to go to the gym? So if you can only have, let's say, a 9 a.m. class and a 12 a.m. or 12 p.m. class, but you can only have 14 people in there, where before you used to be able to have 35 or whatever that may be, well, you're going to end up charging more to be able to come to these prime time classes potentially. So who's going to be able to afford that? So it's all of a sudden exercise in, you know, your club environment potentially down the road is going to be very a socioeconomic thing, is who can afford to pay for prime time. And gyms are probably in the long run are going to end up charging more because you can't have as many people coming in, and the staff has to spend more time cleaning. So looking at that cost effectiveness. So we're going to see that physical activity or inactivity is going to be more of a problem post-COVID than it was prior. It was a problem before, it's going to be a bigger, at least this is what we're anticipating, we're trying to plan for. So we want to get people moving. Physical activity is honestly, keep moving and it'll help take care of you. Now, any questions before I move on from physical activity? So we talked about 150 minutes a week of cardiovascular based activity, trying to get some vigorous into there because of the BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. We want to add some strength-based activities, especially weight-bearing activities for cardiovascular, and then strength twice a week. We want to include some balance-based activities, so you can include that in your actual workouts. And of course, keep moving. Try to go for walks on a daily basis if you can for at least 10 minutes. And I won't be touching on vitamin D, but I will tell you right now, one of my colleagues at Waterloo is actually doing a research study similar to what we did with the U of C with people living with dementia. And they've added a component to their research study where all of their participants have to take vitamin D. So we're starting to recognize how a vitamin D deficiency can really be problematic in our lives. All right, any questions about that? Good, moving on. So let's talk about the Mediterranean diet. So Canada's food guide, last year we came up with a new food guide, but prior to that there were a lot of issues. There was a lot of feedback. It was very heavy on milk, very heavy on meat, and more research was coming out saying, you know what, let's stop encouraging people to drink milk as a fluid. And you can choose to form your own opinion on milk. Some people are very strong about it. Other people are like, meh. Some people are quite against it. But you will see that Canada's food guide did move away from really pushing milk and dairy products, because we are starting to find that why are we drinking our calories? So the Canada's new food guide has really taken a Mediterranean approach to it. And so time and time again, research has shown, and it may not work for everybody. So the Mediterranean diet isn't going to work for everybody. And I know Rory Hornstein was with us, our registered dietitian, a couple of weeks, talking about IBS, Crohn's, and all of those, issues with the bowels. The Mediterranean diet might not work for those individuals. But generally speaking, as a society, we definitely want to look at eating more of a Mediterranean diet. So lots of vegetables, lots of fresh. We really, in the natural nutrition world, we focus on whole, live, natural. Try to eliminate coming from a package as much as possible. So vegetables, fruits. If you're going to eat nuts, if you can, try to eat raw nuts, because the minute that we roast them, you do lose some of the nutritional value. And I have to tell you, I switched my family completely over to everything raw. And initially, everyone was upset that their almonds weren't salted and roasted and delicious. And then eventually they got over it. So trying to eat raw nuts and having a variety of nuts. So if you look at like walnuts, for example, they look exactly like a brain. Well, if you think about a walnut, it's going to feed your brain. It's going to give you a lot of nutrients for the brain. So a good variety. So a lot of people have difficulty with vitamin A, absorbing vitamin A, and that takes care of your lungs and cardiovascular health. You can get lots of vitamin A from sunflower seeds. Looking at your olive oils, trying to get an olive oil, and if you can, try not to get your olive oil at the grocery store because it's probably been on the shelf for a number of years. I know, for example, we get our olive oil, oh, what's it called? I've never had to say it out loud. It's by Shaughnessy in the Southeast, and I'm sure that there's olive oil distributors all over Calgary. But when you have olive oil, if you go, it should actually burn your throat a little bit. That's when you know you have really fresh olive oil. When you don't have that little bit of feedback in the back of your throat when you have your olive oil, then you know that your olive oil has been sitting on a shelf for a really long time. So we want good, like extra virgin, cold pressed olive oil and nice young olive oil. And of course, trying to eat whole grains as much as possible. And then of course, trying to limit the amount of meat and milk, especially red meat. If you're going to have milk, try to get milk that actually is more like a kefir or a kefir. And so something that is, and your hard cheeses versus a soft cheese, you're going to get more nutrients out of that. And then of course, the best part, I think you all saw it before I did, but you can have wine. So wine is an acid, and that acid, a lot of people, a lot of us, and maybe yourself included, you might be taking stuff for indigestion because you feel like you have too much acid. A lot of people actually underproduce acid, and then you go and take like ibuprofen or something, or Tums to help you with the acid. And what you're actually doing is that little teeny bit of acid that you already have, now you've tried to start eliminating it. So I would challenge you the next time, unless your doctor has prescribed something, is maybe the next time you get a little bit of indigestion, take a spoonful of apple cider vinegar, and the Bragg's is the best, I find, Braggs. And you want to have the mother in it. So the mother is kind of a little filmy thing on the bottom. Take a spoonful of that and then have some water. And if that doesn't help with your indigestion, then you'll find out, is it a lack of acid or is it that I have too much acid? And so wine actually provides you with a bit of acid to help you digest your food. And then let me tangent for a moment because I'm really good at that. Why do we have these? For mastication. So it's really important that we probably chew our food. So we recommend that people try to chew or masticate their food at least 20 times. So our food digestion actually starts in our mouth. We have amylase, and amylase actually breaks down carbohydrates. And so when we're chewing and we're mixing that saliva in there, don't speak moistly to me though. But that amylase will get mixed up in the carbohydrate to help digest carbohydrate, so that when you swallow the food and it gets down to your stomach, the acid there is to focus on digesting proteins. And then after we digest the proteins, it moves slightly out of our stomach, and then we digest fats. How do you know if you're digesting your fats? And this is where I come in and I talk about defecating. So when you go to the bathroom, if you notice, well, I always say take a peek. There's a couple of things that you should notice. It should be slightly a darker brown, not black, but a darker brown in color. It should be kind of the toothpaste consistency, and it should float for a bit and then sink, and it shouldn't smell like somebody died in the bathroom. It should actually have a pretty earthy tone. And when you flush the toilet, if there's any streaks on the toilet or left behind, that tells you right away you're not digesting your fats. So it could all be stemming because you're not properly masticating your food. So that's something you can work on to aid in better digestion. So Mediterranean diet, chew, and have a little bit of wine if you'd like, and that'll help you break down your foods. Try to eliminate drinking water prior to eating and after eating, because that's actually all that water is going to decrease the efficiency of the acid in your stomach to break down your foods. If you have to sip, nothing wrong with that, but they say nothing more than a cup of water with a meal. Good? All right, let's move on. Oh, my little slide doesn't want to go. 2 fingers, Jessica. Okay. So individuals who follow a Mediterranean diet will have a decreased risk of cardiovascular disease and total mortality. So less risk of dying. So trying to, and it's baby steps. I'm not saying change everything tomorrow. Try to do one thing to increase it. So maybe increase your fish intake if you're not allergic to it. Maybe get an avocado into your diet. Try to buy more fruits. One of the things that I do with the natural nutrition concept is I try to eat simple foods so my body isn't trying to digest a bunch of things. So in the morning, I break my fast with just fruit. Fruit is very difficult for a lot of people to digest. And if I go and throw a protein in that or another type of carbohydrate that's, like I can't even come up with an example right now. But if I throw in fats and proteins with my fruit, that means that I'm less efficient digesting my fruit, and then I'm going to have more digestive distress. So I eat my fruit in the morning, and then I wait till I'm hungry, because hungry actually sends a signal to the body, and it releases hormones and prepares your body to eat. So look for the hunger signal. That's your body's smart way of saying, it's time to eat, and I'm ready to digest food. So try to keep it simple. Try to increase a few new things into your diet if you can. And then that way there, with a good Mediterranean diet, you're less likely to die from cardiovascular disease and total mortality. All right, let's talk healthy sleep. So it's kind of starting to become all the rage, having a good mattress. I will tell you, over COVID, I'm done. I hate my mattress. I ordered an ND mattress. It came the other day. I'm so happy. I got a new pillow and a new mattress, and it has made a significant difference. And sleep is so important in our society. We've almost made it a shameful thing. Like, you slept 10 hours last night. How can you get anything done? We need to sleep. So when I see things like, I'll say, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he only sleeps like 3, maybe 6 hours, 3 to 4 hours on average. And sometimes he'll sleep 6 hours. Well, that actually, and Dr. Marc Poulin at the University of Calgary does sleep research, and there is a correlation between dementia and sleep. So that's nothing to brag about. So if people are bragging about I only sleep for 3 hours or I only sleep for 4 hours, now maybe perhaps for those individuals, but we know we need sleep. So sleep is an essential component for healthy development and is required for physical health, for mental health, for social health, for emotional health. And if you've ever gone where you have insomnia or you're sleep deprived, you can probably all agree with me and say, yeah, emotionally and mentally, I'm not in a good place. But we may not see those physical components. So being mindful of that. And because, again, our society doesn't value it, and I know, I've even caught myself a few times during COVID bringing my phone to bed and then laying in bed and then passing out pretty much with my phone in there because I'm on social media. So try to eliminate having that technology in your room because it's available. So I included the sleep stages because I know that I used to wake up, whenever I wake up, and I know it's a bit difficult to see, that's why I sent you guys these slides so you could look at them, is when I would wake up at 2 a.m, I would get really upset. Or I'd wake up at 4 a.m. and I'd be like, why am I up? And I'd get myself all worked up. And I'm like, I only have 4 more hours to sleep. And rah, rah, rah. And then I'd lay there and I'd be angry and I'd be upset and I couldn't fall back asleep. This is a normal part of the sleep cycle. So I think when we recognize as individuals that it's okay to wake up in the middle of the night, that this is part of the normal sleep cycle, then we're less likely to get agitated and aggravated, and then we can fall back into sleep. So as we sleep, we're gonna come in and out of these cycles. And as the sleep goes on, those cycles get longer and they get a little bit more different. So when you're first getting ready for bed and you're just laying in bed, that is stage 1. And that's the that you're between the consciousness and the sleep. And this is with light sleep. And this is really important for processing information. So sometimes if you have a lot going on in your mind, you might stay here a little bit longer. And you may process into stage 2. So stage 2, similar, And the brain is still doing a bit of processing. So I have a couple of friends who are on sleeping medications, and they're like, oh, and I'll be talking to them and they're like, okay, I took my meds 30 minutes ago. Like, I got to stop talking to you because I'm about to pass out. And one of the individuals specifically is a paramedic, and she has a lot of PTSD, and she takes a sleep medication to help her because she has difficulty sleeping. But one of the things that is not happening with her, and probably why she's really struggling with her PTSD, is she's not processing. She's not processing her day. She's not processing the events that have happened, and she's choosing, and I don't blame her. She sees horrible things every single day of her life, and she probably doesn't want to think about them. I don't blame her. But by going immediately into a deep sleep and a REM sleep, she never has an opportunity to process her emotions. She never has an opportunity to process her day. So those early parts of our sleeping where we're slightly awake or in a very light sleep, this is where we process our day, the things we said, the things that people said to us. So that's an important part of sleep. So if you do wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, don't get upset, honor it. It's part of the sleep cycle. And if you just relax and you don't overthink it, you will move back into a deeper sleep. And then we move into stage 3. This is where stage 3 repairs our body. So each stage of sleep is really important. We have a stage of sleep that takes care of our brain. We have a stage of sleep that takes care of our body. We have a stage of sleep where we have lots of dreams. And so they're all equally important, and we have to go through those sleep cycles. Stage 4, that's where we're going to be, of course, of our very deep sleep, very limited muscle activity. So we are very quiet in this stage. And then finally our REM stage, and that's where we have rapid eye movement, and our blood pressure and our temperature increases. And this is where we have really interesting dreams. And our REM sleep, as the night goes on, so earlier in the night, our REM sleep is a little bit shorter cycle. And then later on in our sleep, our REM cycle tends to get longer. And each cycle about 90 minutes, depending on the individual. So you will cycle through stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in about a 90-minute cycle, and then you'll cycle through that again. That's why it's common to wake up a few times through the night, is that you're coming up to the peak of your sleep cycle. Does that make a bit of sense? So I included that there so you can look over it and just being mindful of it. Okay, let's keep moving. So why is sleep, of course, so important? Well, if we have insufficient sleep, we are now starting to understand that obesity is also linked to sleep. So if someone is trying to lose weight because they are overweight or they are obese, good sleep habits and getting adequate sleep will actually make a significant difference in their weight loss journey. So when you're not getting enough sleep, you're more likely to be overweight and obese. You are more likely to develop type 2 diabetes. That means that we are not insulin dependent at this point. It means that the glucose is not getting pulled into the cell. We're more likely to develop and experience depression. For students, lower academic achievement, poorer quality of life, obviously, and then risk-taking behaviors increase. And it's also associated with cognitive and psychomotor control. So that can be a danger for people on the road who are driving, or like I'll use my brother-in-law, for example, who's a surgeon. And the other day he showed up at my place and he had done 10 surgeries that day and literally was sleeping on his feet. So I sent him downstairs. We have a dark room that's really cold, really comfy. So that's one of our spare bedrooms downstairs. And I sent him downstairs to the spare bedroom and we made him nap for 2 hours. And so, you know, and it's because he's getting back into surgeries, but do we necessarily want to have a surgeon who's exhausted doing surgery on you? I don't know anybody who does. So that's going to affect our cognitive and psychomotor control. So mood, thinking, concentration, memory, learning, vigilance, and of course, reaction time. So all impacted by sleep. Now, what's some good sleep hygiene? So one of those things, and that's where, again, if I'm going to walk the walk and talk the talk, I had to go get myself a new mattress. We had a beautiful, fancy mattress that we spent way too much money on about 10 years ago. And because it was so soft and cushy, it kind of, and my husband, my husband looks like he's Viking. So I have a very tall, thick, Viking-esque Irish Scottish looking husband. And so he's heavy and he made a big dent in the mattress, and then we flip the mattress and he makes another dent in the mattress and we flip the mattress. I was living in a hole. I was living in this hole. So we got a new mattress. So really important, if you hate your mattress, think about, you spend so much of your life sleeping, spend the money on a good mattress, make sure you have a good comfy pillow. Jumping over to the other side, go to bed and wake up at the same time every day. We are creatures of habit. Our body loves it. Try to avoid caffeine consumption in the late afternoon, especially for those of you who are sensitive to caffeine. And if you're not sure, one of the things I did with Samara Fileski-Hunt, our registered dietitian at the Glencoe, is I had my whole family do the nutrigenomics genetic testing. And what it does is it tests 45 different genetic markers in the body. And so it lets you know if you're good at absorbing vitamin A or if you're caffeine sensitive and things like that. So one of the things is my husband actually gets really tired after drinking caffeine, and then he thinks he has to have more caffeine. So then he keeps drinking coffee all day to stimulate himself, but in reality, he's understimulating himself. So his body actually doesn't like caffeine, and it responds by making him sleepy and tired. And that increases likelihood of developing cardiovascular disease. So that's one of the things we've been working on with him, is to try to limit caffeine consumption because it actually makes him tired. It doesn't stimulate him. So being mindful of that. And when we're thinking caffeine consumption, it's not just coffee, not just tea. Those energy drinks have become very popular, and we really have snuck caffeine into a lot of food. I guess now they're giving us permission to start drinking in the morning. So no alcohol at night, start at 10. I didn't start yet, so I guess I'm behind. So try to limit your alcohol in the PM, avoiding cigarettes and cannabis. Now, when I say cannabis, they're saying smoking cannabis, THC, not CBD. And if anybody has any questions about THC and CBD, those are the two different components of cannabis. So THC kind of gets you a little loopy-doopy. And then the CBD, though, lots of people take CBD for sleep issues and for anxiety. So this was from one of my textbooks that I teach my students. And so they weren't very clear on that, but we are finding that THC, and some individuals do really well having THC and going to sleep because it actually calms their mind. But this was just a blanket statement. So just being mindful, if you are using CBD oil to help you sleep, continue doing what you're doing. Of course, bright light in the morning. So you want to open up those blinds and let the light in, because our body, not just our eyes, but our body has little sensors all over, photosensors all over that respond to the light. We also want to make our room conductive to sleep. So if you have one of those individuals where you don't have, your blinds are not very dark, or you don't have blackout blinds or whatever that may be, invest in it. So it's interesting, I was reading one of the research studies, and they had individuals sleeping in blackout rooms, but they just had one little stream of light hitting the top of the hand of some individuals. So they had, of course, you know, it was a study where they had a control group and a non-control group. And so the one group slept in complete darkness, and then they measured their sleep quality. And then they had the other individuals sleep in complete darkness, but with just one little bit of light, this little beam of light that came down and hit their hand. And even those individuals, even though it wasn't affecting their eyes weren't being affected by the light in the room, those individuals didn't sleep as well. So our body is trained to respond to light. It wakes up with the light, and then our skin and our eyes and everything tells us it's time for bed when we see darkness. So you want your room nice and dark, as quiet as possible. Now you can have white noise if that helps you sleep. Of course, make it comfortable, and we want it cool. So you want a nice cool room to the point where your blankets, you're like, I have to sleep with my blankets. So you want a nice cool room. And of course, making sure that you're sleeping on a comfy mattress and pillow. If we exercise on a daily basis, then that means we're going to use energy, which is going to help us sleep better. Trying to develop a relaxing routine before bed. So doing some breathing exercise, perhaps some meditation. And when we talk meditation, it doesn't mean you have to sit cross-legged with your fingers touching, and you don't have to see all the dots and see orange. And just 5 minutes where you're processing. So think of that almost like stage one of your sleep stages is sit down. Maybe you read. One of my big things is I like to read. So reading, processing, breathing, because if you think about breathing is the fundamental thing for everything we do in our lives. When you came out of your mom, even if you cried, you wouldn't be able to cry if you hadn't taken a breath. So breath is really important. Don't go to bed hungry, but don't eat a full meal. So you do want to have a little nibble if you can, but we don't have a big meal because what we want to do is we want to give the liver an opportunity to do what it's doing at night. So, I'm going to use like the Glencoe, for example. At night, we don't realize, but we have a whole cleaning team that come in, and that always happens, and they clean the whole Glencoe so that in the morning, the Glencoe is fresh, new, and clean. And they've been doing that, of course, since probably 1931. But we don't see it. Well, the same thing happens when you're sleeping, is that your body is renewing, regenerating. And so we don't want to have too much food or water in our body so that the liver doesn't have to focus on trying to help assist in digesting food. We want it to be doing the other 450 things that it's supposed to do. Now, this one I'm really bad at. No pets in your room. I'm not agreeing with that. I can't sleep without my pets, but I have had in the past a massive Labrador, and she used to take up a lot of space, and she was a bit of a bed hog, and I didn't sleep as well. Now I have a smaller Labrador, and then we've got our little Chihuahua Schnauzer mix. He's a Chiza. Have you ever heard of that? A Chiza. And he's my little snuggly woogly. He sleeps up here. And of course, try to reserve your room for sleeping only. So try to keep your phone out of your room, try to keep your television out of your room so you're not overstimulated, so that when you do go in your room, it's a place for sleep, or other things that you can do in your marital life that we're not going to talk about. Good? All right, let's keep moving. So mental health and self-care, of course. And again, because it's a small talk, I didn't want to go into any of the mood disorders or anything like that. But recognizing that, yes, lots of people do live with mental health issues. I know personally, I know anxiety is a big one in my family, and especially on my dad's side of the family. And I did experience a great deal of anxiety when I was a lot younger in my life. But the minute that I started to create lists and schedules, I started eating properly. I think I spent the first 25 years of my life completely dehydrated. So think about how important water is. Water is important to the brain. It's a major conductor in the body. It helps move things around. So I spent most of my life dehydrated. So I encourage you, if you can, drink more water. If you're getting a lot of nutrients into the body, and I'm going to use the example of playing hot potato. So has everyone at some point maybe played the game of hot potato, where you pass the potato around, and then when the music stops, whoever has the potato gets burnt and you're out of the game? Well, the same thing happens in our body with nutrients. So cellular function and different types of hormone production requires that we have certain vitamins and minerals in our diet. But if we carry a gene variant that's been awakened, it can be difficult for us to absorb maybe vitamin A. Or maybe, I know in my family, because of anxiety, we blow through vitamin B. So I get vitamin B deficient very easily. So I intentionally eat a lot more foods with a lot more vitamin B so that I don't have to be medicated for my anxiety. And I have I don't even have anxiety anymore. And it stems because I've got the proper nutrition coming into my body. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't days, of course, where there's more or less. But when the nutrients is there, the game of hot potato just keeps going. And then that way nothing gets stuck. So when we don't have a certain vitamin or a certain mineral available, then our body cannot continue the process. And so you might not be able to absorb those nutrients like I was talking about. The other thing is to remind ourselves, like our society has done, is that busy means that you're popular. Busy means that you're important. Busy means, that good things. But we don't take enough time to smell the roses, to stop. And I think that's one of the things that I really enjoyed with our self-isolation, is that for the first time in my actual career, probably my whole entire life, because I just went to school, and I went to school in the summer, and I worked multiple jobs, and I still work multiple jobs. This forced me to take a break. And it forced me to spend more time with my kids. And it forced me to spend time with my husband. And it forced me to just sit back and not feel bad for not doing anything. So I hope one of the things that we get from COVID is reminding us to take a little bit more time on taking care of ourselves. And when we say self-care is not about self-indulgence, it's about self-preservation, it doesn't mean that it has to be a bubble bath. It doesn't mean that you have to go to the spa. And it honestly, for me, it's in the morning, getting up. I have a beautiful backyard. I was very fortunate. The original owners were landscapers. And trust me, we have a pool in our backyard. We've got amazing trees, everything, flowers at different times of the season. Like, they just did an amazing job. And my favorite thing now is to get up in the morning and just go sit in my backyard. And I made a Tweety bird lane, so all the birds, and I feed the birds. And, you know, to me, that is my self-care. I take 5 to 10 minutes every day now, and I would have never had that time before, to just sit outside and be quiet. So thinking about what is your self-care routine. And the next slide, and I really enjoy this because I do actually motivational talks at different conferences, and I do keynotes, and I love this. And I have to say, I've gotten better at this over the years, and there's still things I need to work on, but this will help you. If it feels wrong, don't do it. And I tell this to my girls all the time, my young girls, is because they're at that age, they're grade 6 and grade 7. So lots of influence from their friends. And I keep reminding them that if you don't want to do it, and if you don't want to hang out with that person or whatever that may be, you do not have to do it. And you don't have to explain yourself. And if you say, the next one, of course, is say exactly what you mean. And I'm dealing with that with one of my, with one of our employees, because she doesn't want to hurt my feelings. And so she's having a hard time because she's got a few little things she wants to work on at work, and she's not really happy, but she's scared to tell me because it hurts her. She doesn't want to hurt my feelings. And I have to remind her that this has nothing to do with me. How can I make her experience at work even better? And so she keeps beating around the bush. And then I'm like, just tell me what you want. So say exactly what you mean. This is one, and I know for our female friends here, and I don't know about you too, Dor, but don't be a people pleaser, right? Not everybody's going to like you, and that's okay. And I know that that's been a journey for me. I like when people like me. I like being liked. But I'm also okay at this point in my life. If you don't like me, it probably has nothing to do with me, because I do try my best to be a kind person. And trust your instincts. Our society has taken that away from us, where it's, you know, we look to other people to be like, well, what do you think? No, what's your gut telling you? What is your heart telling you? Deep down inside, you know what's right. Trust your instincts. What is your gut telling you? And never speak badly about yourself. So that's one I'm always reminding people. Like, I'll hear my friends be like, oh, my hair is this, or I got fat, or I did that. Stop it, right? Don't talk badly about yourself. You're supposed to be your biggest fan. Never give up on your dreams. You know, and that's so much easier said than done. I know my husband is in the oil and gas industry, and he's a little bit miserable right now, are you surprised? But I keep reminding him, being his coach, to be like, hey, you know, if you need to sell the company, I'm okay with that. Sell the company. If we have to sell our house, I'm okay with that. I would rather us be poor and happy than rich and not happy, right? So follow that. Oh, Denise, you're running away. Don't run away. Well, yeah, you can run away if you need to. And of course, don't be afraid to say no, and don't be afraid to say yes. Don't say yes because you're worried about somebody else's feelings, but then don't be afraid to say no. So doing it based on what your needs, and you don't have to explain anything to anybody. Nobody has to live your life. And of course, resist the need to always have control. And that took me a really long time. Now, right, especially as we went into COVID, I couldn't control that. Now we're shutting down. My employees are like, well, what are you going to do? What am I going to do? I'm going home. but we don't have control. So letting control. One of the best things, and it's a slight tangent. I remember I was doing a talk and a woman told me a story, and her grandmother had just passed away and she got her grandmother's ring. And it's going to make me emotional. Oh, hello, my Labrador. And she lost the ring down the sink and it was gone. Like the plumber came over, everything. And she was so sad every time. I'm like, oh. And she told her grandfather, and he said, never cry over anything that can't cry for you. Isn't that amazing? Let go. Don't worry about, again, don't worry about a car. Don't worry about the house. Take care of the people around you. Love people. Love your puppies. Worry about the things that could cry over you. Moving on. And then stay away from the drama and the negativity as much as possible. So the news right now, oy. So if you need to, check out. If you're finding that you're watching a news station that is just sensationalizing everything, walk away from it, right? We don't need that kind of stress in our lives. So those are the 10 steps to self-care. Hopefully, these little reminders, so getting a little bit more physically active potentially. I wonder, can you see the dogs? Are they both here? Here they are. Wrestling always. So physical activity, trying to get 150 minutes of cardiovascular training, trying to get 2 days of strength-based activities, add that balance. Think about the foods that you're putting into your life. Drink more water, but try not to drink it during meals. Masticate your food. Eat more foods that are whole, live, natural. Get that vitamin D in the body. We are finding more and more people are very vitamin D deficient. And so I'm going to put a little plug in for the Wellness Center. If you're at the club, we do have vitamin D available that you can purchase. Of course, sleep. So if you're not sleeping well, I want you to try a couple of those new sleep hygiene. Not that this is new, but try a couple of those things to see if it makes a difference in your life. And then take care of yourself mentally. No one has to live your life but you. So if you need help, ask for it. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're a wuss. It means that you are taking care of yourself. And if you're unhappy, what can you do to make it better?